As always, we did it last week. We're going to do it again this week. Emmett, give me your 3 highest of highs coming out of week 2.
Yeah, I'm gonna listen. We're not gonna get through this show without talking about the Green Bay Packers. That's just what's gonna happen. Man, Jordan Love looks good enough. I think. I haven't seen special from him yet. I will say that. I think I've seen a couple of throws that make me say wow, but I have not seen any special. He had a really nice ball. I think it was to Malik Heath in the back of the end zone. That did not get caught last week versus the Falcons. Which it was a very Aaron Rodgers-like throw. But they have impressed me a little bit as a team. I think, well, not as a team, as Jordan Love and some of the young pieces on that offense to go and play against Atlanta with, the lack of people that you were down there doing it with, right? Like Bakhtiari just can't stay healthy at this point. Elton Jenkins, he's now going to be out a couple weeks, but then Christian Watson didn't play. Aaron Jones didn't play. And at one point he had led 4 straight scoring drives. Like, I think that is a very good spot for the Packers to be in. When it comes to the entire NFC, we are third in point differential behind the Cowboys and the San Francisco 49ers, which is always a pretty good stat to be high in.
They're the 2 best teams in the division.
So yeah, I mean, the Vikings literally finished last year. It was 13-4 and had a negative point differential. So point differentials, I would say, a pretty fun stat. But yeah, so if you're third in the NFC in point differential, again, you're 1-1 and your one loss is by 1 point, and it's a game that realistically the coaching staff choked away. We shouldn't have lost that game. Listen, we did, but if they play that one back over again, it's hard to see that they make the mistakes. I'm going to give the Green Bay Packers, one of my highest of highs.
Sure.
I'm going to go number 2. I'm going to go Dak Prescott and the Cowboys so far. Listen, they have not been overly impressive on the offensive side of the football. You don't have to be when that offense is truly, or when that defense is rolling how it is. But Dak Prescott, he's taking care of the football. He has 1 turnover worthy play from PFF all year long. Granted, very easily could have been a pick 6 to Sauce Gardner. But again, he's doing what they want him to do. And I think that that's something that's super important when it comes to the Cowboys offenses. Sometimes they can try to get a little too cute. But I mean, they gave Tony Pollard, I think it was 30-something touches last week. And do I think that he can keep up that? No, but I do think that if they continue to have the success that they want to have, I think that they are going to have to lean on him a little bit more than they did in week 1, but not as much as they did in week 2. But good on Dak Prescott for keeping control of the ball. I'm really stuck on this third one, man. I don't know if you're going to talk about. I will give a mini shout out to the Chiefs defense because I really, really do like all the young pieces that they have over there. Trent McDuffie, a UW guy. Always like to see him succeed. But I'm going to go the other one. Man, he did not finish last week as he left with a concussion. Man, Anthony Richardson's so exciting. He is so exciting to watch. It is really, really fun. I did my boss's fantasy draft for him, and I got him Anthony Richardson as his quarterback. And listen, so like it's not my team, but like my boss doesn't like really watch football, so like it is my team. Man, he's fun to watch. Because I'm very boring when it comes to fantasy quarterback. I'm usually like I'll go get like a Rodgers. It's a guy I'm like, cool, I'll never have to root against him in a game or whatever. Or like a Kirk Cousins or like Dak. But like, man, having one of those guys who's just out there running and just like kind of just playing football like a Josh Allen, man, that's really fun to root for. Hopefully he learns to protect himself a little bit, right? He got banged up at the end of week 1 and got a concussion in week 2. So obviously he's going to have to learn to protect himself a little bit more, but man, he's really fun to watch. And I'm really excited to see what the Colts do through this season.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to pick up where you left off. I think Anthony Richardson is on my highest of highs because I've talked about it all offseason. There's a lot of boom bust potential there. We saw a lot of the boom last week.
Oh, yeah.
Albeit against the Texans, I get it, but we saw a lot of the boom last week for Anthony Richardson. 2, if I'm mistaken, 2 first quarter rushing touchdowns for Anthony Richardson for the Indianapolis Colts. It was a very great win for them last week. My second highest of high, I have to give it to the Falcons. They're 2-0. They're 2-0 with an offense that is super young, a team overall that's super young. And they have, I would say, a chance to make things interesting in that division, a division that I do think is also going to be won by the Saints. But they've got, I would say, a chance for the first time probably since they went to the Super Bowl to start the season 3-0 because they're going to Detroit this week. And I'd say that's a winnable game. Now, I think Detroit's going to win that game because they are the better team, in my opinion, but that is not by any means a lock for the Lions to win that game. The Falcons have a chance to start the season 3-0 before they get their first loss against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and it'll be the first international game of the season. They have to play the Jaguars in week 4, but I think they deserve my second highest of high. But the highest of high for me this week, this one was a tough one. Like the Anthony Richardson one, no brainer. Falcons one for me, no brainer. But if I'm going to come up with a third, I gotta say it's Tampa Bay Buccaneers because they're 2-0. And they're supposed to be mid this year. And they can fall off. But in the great words of Stephen A. Smith, as he does every week, these highs of highs, these lows of lows, they're fluid, man. They can change on a week to week. They're very, very fluid. And so as of right now, given that fluidity, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are on one of my highest of highs for this week. They're 2-0. Baker Mayfield, as you mentioned, he's not a world beater. He's not an MVP candidate, but he is playing great football. Pretty good football. Mike Evans is playing pretty good football. This defense is playing pretty good football. Overall, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers look like a team that we need to pay attention to as the season progresses. And if you take a look at their next couple of games before we get to their bye, what is in week 5, they have a game against the Eagles on Monday night, which will probably be a loss, but then they do have a divisional game on the road in New Orleans against the Saints. They get to see that, like, this is a schedule where we can see the Buccaneers potentially win, or not win the division, but they could, but I also think they could potentially make the playoffs because of how they've started. We saw last season the Giants started very strong, ended not as strong, but they didn't make the playoffs. We could see something similar with the Buccaneers this season. They get my third highest of high because they are 2-0, and you got to show some love for that. I don't like ending things on a negative note, but we got to go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. So what are your 3 lowest of lows from week 2?
Yeah, the Denver Broncos have to make this list, man. They got dog walked. I don't care about the Hail Mary. They got dog walked at home after having an 18-point lead at one point through the game by Sam Howell. The guy you're paying a bunch of money to in Russell Wilson, or I guess his contract hasn't even kicked in yet, can't be getting outplayed by Sam Howell. It just can't happen. So they're just a gigantic dumpster fire, honestly. Like, I think last year there was a lot of people who were really, really high on them, but I look at their roster and I don't know, man. I don't see it. I really don't. Like, yes, their defense last year was really, really awesome. Really, really awesome. But they are also kind of suffering from that not super talented, right? Like, their defensive line, they don't really have a single guy there, right? Like, they kind of have gotten rid of all of those guys, right? Obviously, we talked about Bradley Chubb got traded. Shelby Harris got traded in the original Russell Wilson trade. Like, Randy Gregory's probably the most Randy Gregory and Frank Clark are probably your 2 guys who are like your, biggest and best, but Frank Clark is 30. And Randy Gregory is also 30 and also is the biggest risk when it comes to suspension, fine, staying healthy possible, right? They're just not very talented on the defensive end anymore outside of Patrick Surtain, who, is a top 2, top 3 cornerback in all of football. But it starts with Russ, and Sean Payton talked a lot before the season about the previous coaching job from Nathaniel Hackett. And granted, Nathaniel Hackett, not a great coach, but he's not exactly impressing me a whole lot, Sean Payton. And you know what? When do we start to, talk about how good that Saints defense was? And maybe that's why they were winning a bunch of games late in Drew Brees' career, as opposed to Sean Payton being some excellent coach. When do we start that dialogue? I'll leave it there. I'm also not going to get through this episode. We talked about the Vikings, and there's no way I'm going to get through without trashing the other 2 NFC North teams. Detroit's defense appears to have not gotten any better, man. They went out and they spent a bunch of money on some C+, B- corners, and we're like, we fixed it, guys. We did it. We got CJ Gardner-Johnson and Cam Sutton. Yeah, and Emmanuel Mosley. Yeah, we fixed it. No, you didn't. You didn't. You tried to throw again. You tried to throw together a bunch of mediocre pieces and wrap it up in a bow like Jared Allen used to do. Like, hey, ta-da! But it's not working. It's not working. You should not be giving up. Yes, I understand that Seattle's offense is very talented, and again, I'm known Seahawk hater here, so a lot lower on them than everybody else is. You should not, for the second year in a row, be getting outplayed and outscored at home by Seattle. Again, the leading rusher in the game, again, behind an awesome offensive line, 67 yards from David Montgomery. 67. You drafted a running back in the first round. Use him. Why are you not using him? Aiden Hutchinson looked awesome in week 1. Didn't see a whole lot of him in week 2. I could be wrong. I didn't see a whole lot of him. So they again, another Jared Goff pick 6 in a high scoring game. Another pick 6. Yes, his big thing is, he doesn't turn the ball over. Listen, that's awesome when it's Aaron Rodgers, when it's a guy who can go out and he makes all these spectacular throws and plays and he doesn't turn the ball over. Whereas Jared Goff is very mediocre and apparently doesn't turn the ball right. He got on this streak at the end of last year where it's oh my gosh, Jared Goff doesn't turn the football over. And it's well, that's not really how he's been throughout his career, if I'm not mistaken. He was never really a massive turnover guy, but to pretend that he was just Mr. Protect the ball when, 2018, 12 picks, 2019, 16 picks. And I remember Dak Prescott getting killed for 15 picks, if I'm not mistaken. 2020, 13 picks, 20 touchdowns. He's last year was his best statistical season ever. And he went on literally the third best run in NFL history of not throwing picks in pass attempts. Are we expecting that from this guy who we've seen what he is? We need to stop, especially and again, this is going to turn into a Seahawks and Geno Smith rant too, but it's we've seen what these guys are. We saw what Geno Smith was. I'm still not buying into him. We've seen what Jared Goff is. The guys who traded up, or sorry, I guess not the exact same guys, but the team who traded up in the draft to get him didn't want him anymore. They were we think we could be a really good team if we had anybody but him at quarterback. And we saw them go in, and I think they played a playoff game at Seattle where, John Wofford got the start. And granted, he left with an injury, but Jared Goff on a thumb, wound up going out there and playing just well enough to win. I really don't see it with the Lions. Granted, our division, not great. And how confident am I in the Packers after last week? Not as much as I was after the previous week. I thought all right, you should be able to go in there and beat Desmond Ridder, but Detroit's defense doesn't look super great. And especially now with CJ Gardner-Johnson, who is one of their big additions, looking like he's going to be out for the year, or out at least for a little bit. Probably not, super great, right? I think they have 0 sack, or sorry, not 0 sacks. I was looking at a different stat there. They have not done super well on defensive end all season. I guess they beat the Kansas City Chiefs and they held them to a lot of points, but I think a lot of that was more to the Kansas City Chiefs kind of giving up the game, or Kadarius Toney giving up the game. And then again, I can't leave out the Bears. Man, you see what happened this morning? Defensive coordinator resigns. Man, got lit up by Jordan Love and Baker Mayfield and was I can't do this anymore. The Bears continue to be a clown show who can't develop a quarterback, who just tries to take all the players from all the other NFC North teams and Frankenstein themselves together a winning team. But it's all right, man, you have fun with Equanimous St. Brown and Chase Claypool and Luke Getsy and all these guys, and hey, let's invest let's just throw around some money to linebackers in the year of our Lord 2023. Let's just do that, and then we'll try to microwave something real quick, and then we're not even going to use DJ Moore, who we got instead of a first round pick. I don't know. I had to make sure all of the NFC North outside of the Packers got some smoke. Every time I have to make sure that they remember. Although we did not win the division last year, they remember who the big dog is.
That's no problem with me. Yeah. I do have 3 lowest of lows. They are all from the AFC. We have all kind of tap danced around them for the bit, but I'm going to talk about it some more. The Cincinnati Bengals are not the lowest of low for me, but they are one of my lowest of lows because of the calf injury. I've already talked about it. I'm not going to cry on the stream tonight, so I'm not going to go into it some more, but just know that they do deserve to be on here. I am not an unbiased lowest of low. Second, it's the LA Chargers. Won't get into it that much because I am also a Justin Herbert fan, and I don't want to cry on the stream. And so far, I'm 0-2 with where I like to be. But I will say this, first team ever to score 50-plus points in 2 weeks and be 0-2, the Los Angeles Chargers.
Hey,
Thank you for coming.
Listen,
Brandon Saylor should be fired by the end of the season.
Man, dude, they know how to go down in just spectacular fashion, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
Like they are the most entertaining football team. Like 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter and later. Like, it is so much fun to just, like, you know, they're sitting there with the lead and the ball, and you're like, man, it's going to be awesome when they lose this game. Like, I can't wait to see what fumbled punt or what botched snap is going to happen here. They're just the most – it's like a car crash in NASCAR, right? Where it's like you just, like, you can't look away. You're just like, oh, like covering up your face, but, like, still peeking that eye over. They're glorious, man.
Now, we all know where I'm going with my absolute lowest of low. If you don't know where I'm going with my absolute lowest of low, buckle your seatbelts because I'm going to take you on a ride. About 18 months ago, news broke that a surefire future Hall of Fame quarterback had waived his trade clause to go from one small city in Seattle to another kind of small city in Denver. And go from the Seahawks to the Broncos. That quarterback is, of course, Mr. Russell Wilson, Mr. Unlimited. And since Mr. Unlimited has gone to Denver, the Denver Broncos have won 5 football games. 5.
Out of how many?
Out of 19 at this point. they're 5-14 at this point with Mr. Unlimited. So here's
you're not holding it out for long enough.
Yeah.
Unlimited.
Probably not. But here's the thing, right? So this is here's what everybody said. Oh my God, they're gonna have some competent quarterback play for the first time since Peyton Manning won the Super Bowl. Yeah, have they really had competent quarterback play for the first time since Peyton Manning won the Super Bowl? No, because first of all, they won more games with Drew Lock the year before than they did with Russell Wilson last season. That's a problem. They're 5. They've yet to in 19 games win the same amount of games that Drew Lock won them the year before. That's a problem. It's also kind of embarrassing. That's the first thing. Here's the second thing, what's most important. You got all this Walmart money out here in Denver. And Russell Wilson's 35 years old this year, and he's getting paid $8 million this year to play football. He's getting paid $17 million next year to play football. And then that Walmart money kicks in because in 2025, he's making $37 million to play football. And the year after, it becomes $40 million. I'm sorry, I keep saying thousand. It's not thousand. It's million. He's getting paid $40 million to play football in 2026, and then 44 in 2027, and then $50 million. Half $50 million to play football in 2028. And so far, in Russell Wilson's illustrious Denver Broncos career, what he has shown you is that he isn't better than Drew Lock. He can't win you more games than Mr. Drew Lock. And if you want to sit here and if you want to say, oh, well, it's because of the coaching, and if you're Sean Payton and that's what you want to do, that's fine. Sean, here's the problem, though. So far, through 2 games, Russell Wilson has thrown 5 touchdowns, 1 pick, and you've lost 2 games. Last year, Russell Wilson completed 61% of his passes, 16 touchdowns, 11 picks. Who is Russell Wilson? Is Russ cooked? He is. And so last year I had to sit down, had to listen to the great Justin Marvel, I had to listen to Steve A. Smith, I had to listen to Guru, and all these other people sit here and swear to me that the Denver Broncos were Super Bowl contenders, and they won 5 games. Well, they say, oh, well, no one anticipated that Russell Wilson would look as bad as he did. Fine. I will cut you and give you that very lazy excuse. But then what did people do this year? Everyone heard
the same thing.
Sean Payton's leaving the Fox Sports desk, and he's coming to Denver, and he's going to put enough ingredients in this stew, and Russ is going to start cooking again. And so far, Russ has cooked up 2 losses. 2 losses.
Yep.
2 losses to the Las Vegas Raiders and the Washington Commanders. Really? And you still want me to believe that the Denver Broncos can beat the Chargers or the Chiefs or the Bills or the Bengals or the Ravens or the Dolphins or the Browns or even the Steelers? No, they can't. And so if you are the Denver Broncos,
thing here is like how they're losing the games, right? Because you look at the stat line and you're like, wow, like 33 points. Like, that's not bad. Then you look, it's like, oh, wait, outside of the Hail Mary, they scored 6 points in the second half against the Washington Commanders. And then you go to Vegas in week 1. They put up, again, you look, and obviously 16 points isn't a lot. But when your defense, because what the stat was last year, it's like they would have won like 12 games or like 11 games had they just scored 17 points. Well,
here's the thing.
there it is
Well,
again,
let's
where they
talk
couldn't
about
score
it.
17 points,
If
and they
they
scored
would have
3 points
scored
in the second half against Vegas. These are, and here's the most important thing: they lost 2 games at home. At home, you can't listen. If you're on the road, you'll get like a little bit of slack. Like, again, you can't lose the Commanders anywhere. My personal thing.
You can't lose the
them anywhere.
Commanders anywhere in the universe. I don't
No,
care if it's Earth, Venus,
no.
Mercury. I don't care where. You cannot lose
if
to the
it's in the
Washington
Milky,
Commanders
if it's in the
anywhere.
Milky Way, you can't lose to Washington. And they put up 3 points in the second half on the Raiders defense. That not great. Don't know if you knew that. Not great. They gave up 38 points to Buffalo. Not a great defense. Yeah. No, sorry, I interrupted you. Keep going. Listen, I hope.
No, let's talk about that part.
Send this clip to Steezy, man. He's.
I know
you were busting him up last week too.
Let's talk about that. So let's look at last season. Last season they played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 games last year they played where they lost and didn't score 7 points, and it was a 1 possession game. If they would have scored 17 points in those games, they would have been 4 wins, 2 ties. So it would have been, let's do some math. It would have been 9, 6, and 2, a playoff team. If they scored 20 points in those games, they would have been a whopping 11-5.
Yeah.
11-5. 11-5 for the Denver Broncos. That's a Super Bowl contender. That's a playoff team, sure. So far this season, how'd they start the season off this year? Unironically, they lost 17-16. The exact same way they lost last year. 17-16. And then they turned around, and you have to think we're surely, just like last season, I've got a bad football team coming to town. A bad football team, not in a good way. This team sucks. Just like the Texans last year. Last year, they could barely put up 10 points. They won this, or they put up 16 points and beat the Texans 16-9. This week, they win all. They got home and they said, you know what? We're going to beat the Commanders. They were up 21-3, and they lost 35-33. And I'm supposed to sit here and believe that all that Walmart money that they paid Sean Payton is going to fix Russell Wilson. Really? You think they're going down to South Beach next week and beating the Dolphins? I don't think they're beating the Dolphins this upcoming week. Could they beat the Bears? Sure. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Say they beat the Bears. They can beat the Jets now that the Jets don't have Aaron Rodgers. But can they really?
Yeah, I'm not even sure.
I don't think so. I don't think so. If Zach Wilson doesn't turn the ball over, I don't know. If Zach Wilson plays like he played in week 1, I don't know. They might actually lose that game. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's say they win the game. Are they going to Arrowhead and beating the Chiefs? No one goes to Arrowhead and beats the Chiefs in this division. Nobody. So you can count that as a loss. Will they beat the Packers? I don't think so. But maybe. I'm a Packers fan. I'm not supposed to think so, but they might. They're not beating the Chiefs when the Chiefs go to Denver, because Pat Mahomes doesn't lose in Denver. Then they've got a bye week, so they'll beat themselves in the bye. Sure. They come out of the bye week, they go to Buffalo. Probably a loss. They have to play Minnesota. I don't want to give Minnesota any credit, but the Minnesota Vikings might actually win that
probably a
football
loss.
game.
Yeah.
Are they going to beat the Browns? If the Browns defense we've been seeing these past couple weeks continues to be the Browns defense, they might not beat the Browns. Will they beat the Texans? I hope so. And I hope for their sake this time around they score more than 16 points when they do it. Will they beat the Chargers in Vegas? I mean, in LA? They could. Again, for their sake, I hope so, because the Chargers look rough. But maybe they'll get it together. They should. Will they beat the Lions? I hope so. Will they beat the Patriots? Oh, they better. Then the Chargers again, they close up with the Raiders. Why did I just run down the schedule? Because I am looking at, again, for the second consecutive season, a team that's supposed to be a Super Bowl contender that might not even make the playoffs. They might not even make the playoffs. The Denver Broncos, for the second consecutive season, are probably going to be bringing up the caboose in the AFC West. They might just be. They might just be.
Yeah.
And so, for all you people out there,
I see 4, 5 wins on there, right? Like Bears.
For all you people
maybe
out there,
Jets. Yeah.
Look, I am not a Russell Wilson hater.
I am.
I'm not. I want to make that crystal clear. Do I hate that he played for the Seahawks and caused me some pain as a Packers fan? Absolutely. But if we just date back to the last time we saw the Broncos play football, which was January 8th, where they beat the Chargers for their 5th win of last season, they won one game since then. They won one game since then. And the one game they've won since then was in the preseason against the Rams. So it doesn't even matter. They're 5-19 in the Russell Wilson era. I'm sorry, 5-14 in the Russell Wilson era. Through 19 games that Russell Wilson's played in the Denver Broncos uniform, they're 5-14. There is no more riding for Denver. There's no playoffs for Denver. There's no more competent quarterback play for Denver. And the problem is you paid Russell Wilson all that Walmart money, and this is what you have. And you're not going to be able to move off from him. Because I don't care how desperate a team is. I don't think anybody wants this.
No shot.
I don't think anybody wants this. I think there's a lot of teams out there.
Ask Cleveland.
Yeah.
Sure.
I am sure. They might need to make sure that they haven't lost their receipt. Because they might need to go knock on Roger Goodell's door and ask for a refund. Because that's a mess. We don't have enough time to get into all that. Because they'll probably suck it up. They'll probably suck again some more next week, and they'll be on my lowest for next week. It is always a pleasure to have my guy, Emmett Savores, on the show. Not just because he's a Packers fan, but because it's always good to talk football with my guy. As you can tell, he's on the other side of the country because he still has daylight outside. Do I still have